Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item will be public forum, 5 minutes per item maximum. We would like to welcome the members of the public who have taken the time to attend this meeting and provide comments on matters related to district business. Any member of the public may address the board relating to any matter within the board's jurisdiction. This need not be related to any item on the agenda. However, the board cannot act on an item unless it was noticed on the agenda. Person speaking during the public comment will be limited to 5 minutes, or depending upon the number of persons wishing to speak, it may be reduced to allow all members of the public the opportunity to address the board. Any member of the public have anything they would like to talk about?
Mr. President, I don't see any members of the public, but I do have staff here that is interested in presenting information about last week's storms, and rather than hold them until the reports at the end, I'd like them to address your board at this time.
Great, thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Elected at the last second not to provide a bunch of pictures, but quite frankly are kind of underwhelming compared to some of the pictures you saw and videos you saw on TV, on Facebook and social media and stuff. But last Wednesday was quite an epic storm for a portion of the town, mostly Sonora. I just asked Glenn before I came over how much rain did we receive in a 24-hour period. It's about 2.9 inches, which by itself doesn't sound a whole heck of a lot. We've received more than that plenty of times, I'm sure, David. We just don't oftentimes get 2 inches in 20 minutes. So I don't know that it really came down in 20 minutes, but that's surely what it felt like. So the district, did receive, some significant impacts to our infrastructure. Notably, the ditch system in certain areas had some impacts, which I think you read about in the newspaper, and that's why if you have some questions for ditches, I asked Eric to step up and answer some questions you might have on the ditches. And down at Regional, we took on an awful lot of inflow to the treatment plant, but we were able to contain all of that water into the treatment plant and kept it all in process. So. But that didn't, naturally, none of that happens by accident. It takes a lot of work. Actually, right in the middle of it, Eric Hall set some forces down to help David with sandbagging, containing, trying to keep this water where it was supposed to be. So it was a group effort, but all in all, we've had worse events, but that one was quite a sight. So I figured we'd better at least come up and tell you that, yes, we're impacted. We're recovering again. David's got some crews down there reacting to the recovery now, and Eric's got some crews and has had some crews out there recovering on the ditches. So if you have any specific questions about the ditches or the sewer treatment plant down there in Sonora, we'll have those guys answer. As far as the other areas, the water treatment plants obviously saw some impacts to these, but managed well through them. It was really isolated down there towards Sonora, so the upper regions didn't see much. Some of the turbidity and some of the reservoirs like Matlow and of course Phoenix Lake rose about like they would normally and have on the way to recovery. So anyway, with that, got some specific questions. Go ahead.
So I would just like to say this. I had a little discussion with David prior to the meeting, and if there's a bright side to whatever happened last week is that I think now that pre-planning for anything like that in the future with the additions, changes happening to the water treatment facility, you'll know what to do and it won't get caught off guard next time. So in that part, seems like a really positive, maybe the only positive part.
No, that's a good point. In fact, we were able to. One good note, it didn't happen at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
For once, it happened during normal business hours. That was nice. Thank you, Mother Nature. Two, we were able to actually put eyes on it right in the very beginning, so we were able to see where our weaknesses were and need to, like you say, plan on future upgrades to minimize those weaknesses. last. David's been around 30 years, right? And he's seen a few of those that he, in his words, is probably the worst one we've had. But he was there with past experiences and had some newer operators on scene. With Eric's help, they were able to calmly mitigate the big issue down there. So we were fortunate in a lot of ways to have, past experience, daylight, some new operators on scene to see how we manage some of these emergencies. So.
Awesome, sure. Barbara?
Oh, I think you had your hand up first, but.
I just was curious what some of the raw turbidity readings were coming in and how they reflected to what the all-time highs were that we've had.
Yeah, so I want to say Matlow is around 400 units of turbidity, right? And of course, at the Columbia treatment plant, we have the package plants. They don't care for turbidity much above 25. It's kind of pushing the limit. So 400 wasn't fun to deal with. But Eric and those guys, they know how to blend the Matlow water with ditch water, which is sort of flashy. I think it's down in the 40s now, right? Or 30. Yeah, so all-time high for Matlow, that's pushing it. That's getting right up there, right, without being specific. It's pretty close to all-time high there. At Sonora, though, I didn't hear that Sonora went crazy, but I would imagine it got into 200-300 units of turbidity out of Phoenix Lake. I've seen it at 700-800 there. Pass.
That's some ink.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'll direct this to Eric back there too. I drove during the rain, was coming down the bypass, and I was looking over the left to see the abandoned section of, is that the Phoenix?
Phoenix ditch.
And it was clearly, here this thing's been abandoned, it clearly has stormwater in it. It was really kind of cool. And so that was, I didn't know where it went, but I'm looking at, oh, that's kind of a cool opportunity wherever it ends up in terms of capture. And then my question with the Gettings property there, okay, so I know you guys are really on it, shutting down the ditch and putting it down the random into Sonora Creek. So was that it runoff?
That was
runoff?
all runoff.
So that was all capture, and let's just be out here, that's capture out of the Tuolumne system, and then that's shunted over into the Stanislaus, back into the Stanislaus. It's crazy. Yeah, so that was runoff. Wow. Okay. What an amazing service. Yeah, amazing. Okay.
Anyway, any more questions? That's it? All right.
Any other questions for Don?
I got a couple observations and a question. One, I know that there's been a lot of work at the wastewater treatment plant that I think needs to be taken credit for staff better managing storm flows in the past. Those systems were tested to their maximum, but if it had been like 20 years ago before some of those improvements that Dennis and the crew have done, it probably would have been a greater problem. So they've been addressing and improving stormwater management on site over the decade. So this one is good information as we talk about designing the future upgrade. But if it hadn't been for some of the ongoing upgrades that the construction crew's done over time, it probably would have been a greater problem than it was. Because Eric and I went down there right after our strategic plan workshop and drove across the bridge with a foot of water on it, and everyone's going, whoa, with the water going underneath whatever that fairgrounds building is there. I kind of wondered if the truck got washed off, would it go underneath or just,
Probably not.
It was a little scary driving across that bridge with a foot or maybe 18 inches of water, just white water over it. But it was an awesome site down there at the wastewater treatment plant. What I did like to see is all hands were on deck. There were multiple crews. I even saw Eric Hall driving the front loader and dumping that material to the mix. I mean, there was a lot of people moving very quickly to keep stormwater from getting into the ponds. But we did get some stormwater in the ponds. That's not a good thing. So what was the increase in Quartz Reservoir? Was it appreciable?
I meant to ask, David, do you get a level?
My last known was Friday. The storm impact from that storm in particular may have been as much as a 1 foot increase. And we are right about 51.5 feet on the staff gauge right now. So we still have plenty of storage. But it was definitely, we've been moving out water for Actually, about a week. The ground is so saturated that we're still seeing elevated flows coming in.
David and his crews have been, stuck at the plant trying to recover from just locally right there at the plant. It washed a lot of debris into all of the different components of the treatment plant. So they're there and have been nonstop trying to get the plant back in tip-top shape, and haven't really been out to Quartz fit to be on site just yet. But Quartz, 2 weeks ago, Quartz was about 48% of capacity. So there's plenty of capacity left to absorb 3 inches of rain a day. From here on out, we'll be fine. I doubt we're going to get 3 inches of rain a day from here till April 15th. So I think we're in good shape as far as Quartz goes.
Good. Well, thank you all for doing a great job.
Right.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anything else? Did I miss? They're being polite.
There are. Thanks, Don. Regular business?
Consent calendar.
Consent calendar.
Item number 1, minutes of the regular board meeting of February 26, 2019, and special board meetings of February 21st and March 6, 2019. Item number 2, approval of reimbursement claims for director's statement of meetings attended and or travel expenses and the claim summary for February 2019.
Any comments?
I'd like to pull item number 2.
Okay. Number 2, any other comments or questions from the board? Okay.
Probably want to vote on 1 first and then go to
Public
2.
comment?
Pardon?
Public comment if you're going to vote.
Yeah, is there any public comment? No public comment? Okay. We'll vote on number 1.
Motion, second.
Yeah, God.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of February 26, 2019, and the board meetings of February 21 and March 6, 2019.
I'll second that.
It's been regularly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the last 2 board meetings. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, any opposed? Carried. I love this thing.
It's like a little kid with
Keeps everybody awake.
We couldn't tell. We could not tell.
Keeps us all awake, including me. Next will be
Number 2.
number 2.
Yeah. So the reason why I pulled the claim summary is I want to thank our finance director for the great job of putting some explanations with the checks. I really appreciate it. I hope that it didn't create a huge extra workload for you, but we now know what we're voting on, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Any other comments on number 2?
Public comment?
Ask for public comment.
I just did.
She just did. No public comment. We'll approve the claims calendar.
I move to approve it.
I'll second.
Then regularly moved and seconded, we approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Carried. There's a real light one there. Next is regular business, Melissa.
Okay, item number 3, first reading of proposed amendments to the district's water rules and regulations and wastewater ordinance. Set public hearing for April 9th, 2019, and authorize publication of the notice of public hearing along with proposed amendments regarding disconnection of service by customer.
All right, President, members of the board. This particular item has been the subject of past board conversation, hasn't been specifically agendized, but just to give you a little background, in 2016, shortly after GM Haglund arrived, we went through an overhaul of our water rules and regulations and our wastewater ordinance, and we did a really exhaustive look at all the sections. And the intent at that time was we had recently completed a rate study, a CIP, and had a new rate structure. And we felt, you know what, let's bring the entire ordinance code up to standard. And one of the things that changed at that time was the addition of a clause that was a disconnection from system prohibited, basically. And unfortunately, you don't realize what there are unintended consequences when you go through and change ordinance code. And that is what happened here is we hard-coded in no disconnection from our system. And I think the thought at the time was, wow, we adopted a new rate structure and we were concerned that there would be a big surge of people wanting to disconnect because TUD's rates went up. It didn't happen that way, and instead what we got were a number of issues that Antonio deals with on the customer side related to circumstances where disconnection maybe is a tolerable thing. And what we're proposing to the board here is some new language in both the water rules and regulations and the wastewater ordinance that would allow disconnection under certain circumstances and with GM purview over when that would happen. So I'll just run through a couple, interrupt me at any time, I'll run through a couple scenarios here. One, quite recently, toward the end of last year, we had a property owner come in who had a secondary dwelling, accessory dwelling, if you will, on site, and was no longer, basically had already connected his primary. He had two services on his parcel and had connected his house and this other dwelling unit, and wanted to disconnect. And as you know, we're kind of working through the accessory dwelling policy. That will be a subject to come to the board once the county resolves their issues with accessory dwelling. But that was one circumstance. Another circumstance, like for instance, the cancer center. When the cancer center went in, they purchased a couple of parcels there and merged them into one parcel. Well, each of those parcels had water services associated with them. Our current policy would not allow for a disconnection, even though there was obviously no reason for them to have multiple services and pay multiple base fees for that. Another example is occasionally we'll get someone who has a multifamily home, a dwelling, and they want to just convert it back to a single family. Maybe they had a unit downstairs or in back that was a rental apartment, and in those cases, we make sure that they go through the permitting process with the county, and it is designated as a single-family residence, but that's a good example of where you may not want to have 2 meters. Another example, I won't belabor this too much, I just want to give you the reasons why we're bringing this up. Shopping centers where you may have multiple, retail spaces, they may get merged into one. And there's really no reason to continue to have 2 services to serve one. Example, this isn't a great example, but let's say Embers, right? Embers just expanded. Now that's all one business, whereas it previously was 2. These have business implications for people when they're paying on a service that they aren't really using. Another example we've had is where maybe there's multiple dwellings on a property and there's a fire and they want to come back with just one dwelling. They don't need two services per se. So there's a number of different possibilities here. If you would like, I can go through the ordinance changes very briefly, but I want to emphasize that it's at general manager discretion with these guidelines. And it also requires them, if they choose to disconnect, to forfeit their capacity. And so that's a really critical aspect. If they need to make the decision, if they're going to disconnect, it means if they choose to come back in, they're going to pay the capacity fee that's current at the time. So it's a big financial decision, because if, our base rates say $60 a month, but our connection fee is $7,200 approximately, you can kind of do the math and say, wow, I guess if I think there's even a slight chance that I'm going to need to reestablish service within so many years, I probably should just keep paying, because our capacity fee also goes up. That's a decision they have to make, but if they do disconnect, they forfeit capacity. I think that's the main gist of it. What we do want the board to consider here is setting a public hearing for April 9th. And at that time, prior to that time, we will post these changes in the newspaper, and we'll take comment and take public comment at the public hearing, and that would be your opportunity to vote to include these in our ordinance code.
Right.
Any questions?
Director Aaron?
So I've read through this thing in detail a couple different times, because as you may well know, I was involved in that one ratepayer at the end of last year.
Overlook.
Yes.
Right.
And I want to commend staff on really laying out a very logical, reasonable plan or policy. And I don't think that we get that many. I mean, in the years that I've been on the board or coming to the meetings, there's been so few of these requests for disconnection. And many times it's stuff that isn't even related to how you've laid this out. So like I said, I want to pat you folks on the back for putting together a good, reasonable policy that I think will work well for TUD and for our ratepayers going in the future. And I just want to underline your point that that's a big decision to let that connection go. And like you were using the retail thing where, they're being combined, so they only need one. Well, if they undo that thing down the road, it's going to be expensive to get that connection back. So, like I said, this is well done. Thank you very much.
Barbara?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. I have a couple of comments. I've noticed over the years the board has sort of become a little bit further removed from policies and influencing policies, or even having a hand in shaping the policy. And while I read this and I really appreciate it, I would like to propose that to kind of reconnect the board with being to participate in this, that we have, when we go have a water rules and reg ad hoc committee, so a couple of board members can take a look at some of the first draft and become familiar with these policies. Some of the policies, I think, got rubber stamped in the past without really any oversight, and not that that's a bad thing, but I think when I look at reintegrating the board with actual formation or input, other than voting on it, it would be nice to have an ad hoc at this for the water rules and regs, and also an ad hoc for the accessibility. Or those dwellings, the
accessory dwelling units?
Yes, and just sit around, a couple of board members with staff, and talk about what are the TUD issues, so we can, really let it all out and really understand it, and then craft a policy with a couple of board members in an ad hoc setting. So that's just my recommendation here.
Any other questions or comments? Are you talking the ad hoc committee just meeting one time?
Yeah, pretty much, just to kind of check in, look over where they're going and why, just listening. Okay. Like, let's say it's, you guys and two of us, and, just checking in, is this a good direction where we're going? So sometimes all of us have something else to consider, so that we have a little bit of just an ad hoc for that while we're working on policies.
Okay.
It could be a yearly, and also the accessory thing.
Okay.
Is that what is the accessory? Yeah.
Accessory dwelling units.
Dwellings, yeah, so that we're not, we're kind of an intermediary. We're not the public. We should have, I think, some level of workings,
Okay.
policy direction in an ad hoc.
And just to piggyback on that, Barbara, the county now with the general plan somewhat in the rearview mirror, they're going to move into their review of their ordinance code, and that may necessitate some calibration or readjustment on our ordinance code just so we can make sure we're not in conflict with each other. The accessory dwelling unit is just one example of that. So I can see this is a work in progress. We sometimes at the district we're like, wow, I want to come to the board one time and get it taken care of. And we wanted to come with a number of things in the back of our mind that we would like to adjust, but this is the kind of issue that is really difficult for staff, particularly Antonio, to deal with. Like Ron, like you said, it's not that common, but when it does happen, to sit across the counter and tell somebody you can't disconnect, it's tough. And you feel like you're not really on solid footing here the way our policy is written. And I think this cleans that up and makes, from a public relations perspective, it's a big improvement.
I think it's very humane.
Right.
It really, not just so cavalier, if you're on it forever. It really is working with folks. And it's nice to have that earlier rubber stamp of saying this is the board direction. We've worked with the board every step in this, and this is their direction. So at any rate, it's not a standing committee. It would just be an ad hoc. I think also we got caught a little bit late, I think, in the planning when we had an ad hoc for the planning. It was really an intense job, and I think if we started out sooner in the ground floor with the county, we would be building bridges with the county.
I think that's the intention, is get a lot more input and dialogue with the county. Mm-hmm. Any public comments or questions? Mr. Steve.
Good afternoon, board member. Steve Sheffield, your finance director. I just want to chime in here because, I'm fully in agreement with Eric and supportive of him, but, we've had discussions for a while now about this, and there's always other sides to the question. I appreciate the board's input, what they've said here, but I want to emphasize we need to practice extreme caution anytime we're looking at a matter like this. For us, for all of TUD, all the customers, all the community, our water rules and regulations and our wastewater ordinance is it. That's what we go by. That's how we can stand at the front counter and explain to somebody, here's why you're charged what you are. This is not willy-nilly. This isn't whatever. This was something that was a painful, dedicated process by the board prior to 2015 to change our rate structure and to bring in this particular regulation that said you couldn't disconnect. I empathize with Antonio and the job he has to do, but for every one Antonio talks to, there's probably 10 customer service have talked to. We get calls, you may say you haven't heard them, only a few. We get calls on a daily basis, people saying, well, I live in San Francisco and I haven't been up there in 3 months. Why am I paying for my water? Well, as all you know, we have fixed expenses that we just can't survive other ways. We can't provide the service we're doing it. So anytime Antonio is considering a disconnection, I want to exercise extreme caution before we do so, because the worst case is we say, hey, yeah, let's just let people suspend and go off. Well, then we're putting people on and off and everything else. Our whole rate structure is based on these fixed charges. Without the fixed charges, we're done. And so it'd be kind of like that straw. That wooden straw up the hill goes away. What do? So I support this, and I think it needs to be very specialized conditions. It's 4 or 5. If we start having hundreds dropping off or whatever else, we're going to have to change our rates. I mean, it's that dire in here. So I'm not saying to not go forward with this, but I want to caution the board to be careful and considerate in going forward. And furthermore, I really want to encourage the board. I hear what Barbara is saying about ad hoc committees, but my personal thing is every board member should know our water rules and our wastewater. You don't have a copy, we'll get you a copy. It's on site, on there. You all should know it. I don't like the idea of just two of you making this decision. I know ad hoc committees work a lot for that, but we have other water rules that we have to address and do that. And that's why we don't update them a lot very often, because as soon as we update them, there's another change or another correction. And they need to be looked at regularly. It'll be part of our strategic planning, part of our next rate study, part of some other ones. So anyway, it's an issue for all of us on here. I think we have to be very careful and cautious. We have people frequently wanting to disconnect, but then when they see the cost or the ramifications or talk it through. And I know that's not what Eric's proposing, and I do support what Eric's done. I've been involved with the language. I've done that. But again, I just felt I needed to give you the finance side, or especially the customer service side. Ron?
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying and don't disagree with any of it. The only thing I will say is I don't think there's one board member up here that would ever even begin to consider furloughs because you live out of the area. I mean, the service is there to your property 365, and it costs to do that. And so I think I know that you're just cautioning us to be careful, but it's like apples and oranges. This is something different in a way, and it has ramifications. When they disconnect, they're done. If they want to get back on later on, somebody's gonna have to slap the pigskin hard to find enough money. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
And I'm not disagreeing. I'm not trying to chastise the board by any means.
No.
I agree with you, Ron. I just wanted to hear our perspective as well, because I think it's important what we are.
I have a question.
Yeah, Bob.
So, using the Embers as an example, what would be wrong with them just disconnecting that second commercial service and not asking for a rebate or anything, and then if they ever defied that property again, they just reinstigate?
You know, I think Eric's examples are very spot on. Downtown's kind of a unique thing in that a lot of those buildings, there's one master sewer account, and it satisfies half a dozen businesses. Embers is kind of a unique one because the person who came in, they ended up not paying their full capacity fee, and then the landlord stepped in, and then Embers stepped in. So Embers is a good example. We would recommend for them to be one account and down there. Now, they have it set up over there. If they don't make it, they can always separate the two businesses, and then we'd have this. But the prior rules didn't allow us to require them to pay the capacity again. You know, there was this permanent notion out there that once they'd paid the capacity, then it's going to stick there forever. And that's just not the case with what we're proposing here. So your example is perfectly right, and we would support that. But sometimes, especially downtown, it's not always easy. Some of those businesses are interlinked in sewer or water or whatever. And so we try to work with them. And just like I think Ron was getting at as well, we've got to work with the customers. You know, we can't just say, hey, 14,000 of them, they all look alike, they all do the same thing. You know, we're a unique community up here. And we have multi-purpose, we have multi-units, we have what I call the old communes and that sort of thing. And you have everything from apartments to resorts to everything in between. So, you know, and we try to look at it that way. And that's the same thing out front here. You know, I pick on the Bay Area because we all do up here, but we also have local people who say the same thing. Hey, I haven't used that ditch in a gazillion years. And, you know, how's this working and how's that? So, you know, I think it's timely. I think it's something we need to address. I just wanted you to hear, you know, this side of it as well. And I'm in agreement with proceeding going forward by all means.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Steve. I thought this was very conservative. You know, it wasn't going to open up a can of worms where, oh boy, open up the door for, special on variances, that this was very responsible. Certainly, I'm not suggesting with an ad hoc that we go back to the drawing board. I am not. I think that's why this is such a great one to start with. This is good work on your to think everything through ahead of time. Run it by Antonio, and start out with this to update the rules and regs. What I'm saying is there are future things that the county is going to do that could affect us in the future, it might be prudent for the board to have an opportunity to be able to merge that so that it's consistent, so we're not having to live with whatever the board, whatever they decided without us being part of the ground floor. So I wasn't, in case you thought this is great. This is a good one to not have any ad hoc input on or development, co-development, whatever you want to call it. So I just wanted to clarify this. I thought you guys did a great job on this.
And it's like Ed frequently, he demonstrates his wave curve. When this came out in 2015, you look at that language, it was way too extreme. Absolutely not. Black and white, can't do anything about it. Whereas here, TUD's always had the ability to come to the board, have a discussion, and say, we'd like a variance, or we'd like an exception, we'd like whatever. And so I think we're right in going back that direction.
If I may jump in, this is exactly why we have this agenda here today. This agenda item today is a follow-up to the action agenda item for the disconnection in dealing with the gentleman that had the accessory dwelling unit. There was no flexibility. And because there was no flexibility, staff is forced to go to the board for even one specific case. And your board asked staff to go back and analyze and bring back a recommendation that would allow some flexibility. And we recognize the importance of the system and the fixed rates and the fixed revenue. So when we look at this, and as the general manager here, we would exercise this extremely cautiously. We're talking in the 1s and 2s per year, if even that. It has to meet very specific requirements, and even then it's not going to be case by case. It will always be an individual evaluation, and if it makes reasonable and prudent sense, then we will allow the disconnection like your board did for that gentleman with the accessory dwelling unit that was already paying for that service. Yeah. So it's going to be exercised very cautiously, and it just gives the GM and staff a little flexibility so that we can be responsive to these unique needs.
Bob?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. We need that flexibility. As you know, my family owns that little water company up the hill here, and we've got about an 80% absentee ownership up there. We get this question all the time. People calling up, well, we only use the cabin once or twice a year. Why do we have to pay all this? So we go through a whole dog and pony show about, well, if we disconnect you, then all your neighbors are paying for your infrastructure. And that sometimes works, not really, not usually always, but and then we go on to the same argument about well, PG&E is the same way. You're not going to ask them to disconnect your PG&E, are you? Well, no, of course not. Well, it's the same idea, and sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't either. But
we know.
But it's funny. We just had this conversation up there the other day. We had a house that burned down, and we may go ahead and disconnect that one. So you got to have that flexibility. That's my point, and we need that here.
Yeah. Our water rules do have something right now where you have an instance where it burns down. We can grant a 6-month extension and then review it after 6 months. Mm-hmm. And part of that was because it's taken so long to get through the county permit process and doing that. So, we do have that into the policy right now for certain acts of God or catastrophes, whatever. We can do that. Yeah. So, thank you, Jeff.
Any other questions from the board? Anything from the public?
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Barbara, what about, you could call it ad hoc or whatever, but invite the entire board? I think it's something that's pretty interesting to sit down and listen,
Like a workshop?
Yeah, like a short workshop.
A short workshop in lieu of an ad hoc.
Right.
And we could amend the motion to say, to amend it to have what would that be? To authorize the board chair to hold a special meeting at the beginning for any subsequent water rules and reg policy changes.
I have to point of order. The agenda item is for the approval of the amendment to the district's water rules and regulations. If your board is interested in workshops or ad hoc committees, that would require its own agenda item. And that needs to be publicly noticed. That's why we agendize these and give the public a chance to comment on these. So that's outside of this particular agenda item motion.
Okay. Very good point. What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I move to set the public hearing for April 9th, 2019, and authorize publication of the notice of public hearing along with proposed amendments regarding disconnection of service by customer.
I'll second.
Any comments from the board? It's been regularly moved and seconded that we set a public hearing for April 9th and authorize the publication of the notice of public hearing along with the proposed amendments regarding disconnection of service by customers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. GM, do we need consensus from the board to do the workshop or ad hoc committee in order to get it on the next board meeting or something?
Well, we're going through our strategic planning process, and your board has, I think that's Thursday, you could bring it up and by consensus, and maybe this is part of your board policies, how do you put items on the agenda? You can direct staff to put that on the next agenda or whenever you'd like for this particular discussion of workshops, for ad hoc committees, and how you want to proceed.
Rather than just say, let's put it on the next agenda?
Well, we could do that too.
I mean,
this gets into a little bit of the chaos of running a board meetings and how you put items on the agenda. I think that's a discussion your board needs to have, and really that's a part of your board policies and procedures on how items get on the agenda. I think it's better to be formal about that process, and we could even add an agenda item at the end of the agenda that might give each board member a chance. I'd like to put this on the next agenda and so forth, rather than just randomly during the course of the meeting.
That's a good idea.
Formalize that process.
Everybody satisfied with that? I think that'd be.
But I mean, again, I think you have your strategic plan workshop, and this gets into your board policies and procedures discussion.
Okay.
But if and again, if your board wants to add this to an agenda item, we're happy to do it. I think staff would prefer if it was done in a formalized manner. But if your board prefers just to do it at the end of an agenda item, we could do that too. It just might be more formal if we had a standing item and or policy that clearly indicates how items get on the agenda.
Okay.
And we can talk about this during the strategic plan workshop because it's not on the agenda for today.
We do in our board rules for procedures and procedures. It goes through how an item is added to the agenda.
Could you say that again, please?
We do have it in our board.
Speak into your microphone.
Our board rules for procedures. It's a whole paragraph on how items are added to the agenda.
That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Our strategic plan is so loaded with so much, and just seems so straightforward, but, let's definitely put this on for a formal discussion, however.
Okay. Thank you. Next item.
Okay, item number 4, award contract to Nugget Sons Incorporated for the construction of the Tuolumne City Water Main Replacement Project.
Okay, President, members of the board, we have in our system a bunch of vulnerabilities. It's a very obvious statement, but we've identified a few critical areas, for instance, where, like in Jamestown, we built a new tank. We're also going to be constructing a new water main that comes out of that tank. It serves, that is the sole supply for that whole area of Jamestown. Similar circumstance in Tuolumne. We have our water treatment plant. We have one tank and one pipeline that serves the entire town site area. In an ideal world, we'd have looping water mains and we'd have multiple water storage reservoirs so we could backfeed water. And, if we have a water main break, we could isolate it and maintain most of the population in service. But in a few of these locations, that's just not the case. So in 2017, the board hired Kennedy Jenks to write a few grant applications. They wrote 2. One was for the funding of the treated water system optimization plan, strike out there, but they did get this grant. So we're batting 500, and this grant was through Department of Water Resources, Safe Drinking Water Bond Law Program, and it's in the amount of $400,000. At the time, we identified that Tuolumne would satisfy the disadvantaged community status, and that there was a need here for this water main, which is a 10-inch AC line that comes cross-country and then down into town, to be replaced. We also added a few other segments of water main and some water services that we'd also like to get covered as well. As you can see, the grant doesn't cover the entire cost, so the remaining portion will come out of our capital budget. Part of that is, you could say, not the best cost estimating. You could also say escalation has occurred since the time in which the project was originally envisioned. You could also say, you know, sometimes projects aren't easily divided, chunked up, and so we were like, you know what, hey, we got to get to the end of this line. It's an extra couple hundred feet. So with all that said, we're approximately $100,000 over our grant amount, and then also we want the board to authorize 5% contingency on top of that. The funding is there in the capital program. It is predominantly grant funded. It's a good project. We would ask that the board consider awarding this to Nugget Sons, who we've done work with in the past and have a good relationship with. We got 8 bids, and you can see the spread. I don't have a good explanation for why the spread is so great. However, if you really look at it closer, we have half of those bids in about a 10% window, which is a pretty good tight spread. And then there's a few up there that I have no idea why they're that high. I will say that the project was designed by a consultant, Provo and Pritchard, so we're just basically handling the bidding, and then we'll have our inspector do the construction inspection.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Ron?
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my question. When I read through this, I go, oh man, what a spread. And I would be really, really concerned about that low bid, except that I know TUD has used Nugget Sons many, many times in the past, and for the most part, they've always done really a good job for us. So it just is, it's eye-opening to me. Being in construction my whole life, that's an incredible spread there. The other thing I want to do is say, pat staff on the back of releasing the job out to contract and having this all being done by outside folks so that our crews can keep after the stuff that is pressing us right now, like repairs and maintenance and things like that. So it's good to see this going out to bid and other entities doing the work. Thank you.
Just a comment on that, because Jennifer's here. Yes, I totally agree. It is a lot of work to manage a consultant, and so it isn't the silver bullet, but it is what we need to do. And I will note, we put this out to bid in December, which would have been completely unheard of in the past here at this district. We had construction seasons, we had bidding seasons, and to put something out to bid in December, so we're now on a year-round bidding and construction, maybe not construction, but certainly bidding. And we were hoping to get a good bid in December, and I think we did get a good bid, the low bid, but maybe some of these other contractors were not interested in locking themselves in for the next construction season, knowing that there could be some other projects out there that would be better, and so they threw a high number at it. I'm just imagining.
So it was Jennifer that was handling this?
I only say that because Jennifer and I are working on some other projects with consultants, and she she has to work quite hard with them. This isn't turn it over to them and then it comes back as a finished product. Many iterations of corrections and revisions, and it is, maybe it reduces the labor by 25% right now. It's certainly not 100% labor offset to hand over to the consultant, but we're trying to develop a relationship with some of these consultants that will grow and to be more productive to where it will be more of a seamless handoff. I'll also say our surveyor did the surveying for this project. We no longer have a surveyor on staff, so we're going to have to integrate in surveying and design and environmental, which it's going to take a while. As you can see, this project was basically funded in October of 2017. So we got about a year and a half, ramp up. And this is not a complex project. It's just that's the nature of.
Well, I just want to say that it makes me even more confident in this project and so on that Jennifer had her hands in it, because I think
Gadiel was involved, but you can
Okay.
feel good about that too.
All right, well, and I do, because I think it was Jennifer that came in with a STEM project under the projected cost, and it was a project that worked out perfect, so thanks.
Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with Director Ringen. I was concerned about that a little bit as well, but you got five bids within 10%, so that's pretty good. Also, you mentioned in the capital fund, we've got money for this. Is that still learning the budget here? Is that the same as the capital improvement fund, or is it a separate fund?
It's the same. We kind of use terminology interchangeably. So we have our budget, and in our budget is the capital portion of the budget. We call the capital improvement budget.
Okay.
And this would come out of that.
All right, and it's not going to impact negatively for our future CIP projects coming down the...
No, we just did some budget forecasting, Dawn and Steve and I, and we looked at what we think we'll accomplish by the end of this fiscal year, and what we currently are under contract to finish, and how much we've already spent, and we have space in the budget to accommodate this expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
I have a clarification question, I guess, for you, Ron. I would assume all these guys have a contingency in their bid, or they're not going to be in business very long. So do you expect them to have another 5% contingency built in by TUD, or what do you mean by that? When you said you'd like to see a 5% contingency built in on top of it?
I didn't say that.
Oh, I thought you did.
I said that, Bob.
I thought you did, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
The contractor gives us their best, lowest, and best, most responsive cost. We, in an ideal circumstance, there is no change order. They build this, and Jennifer's done projects with Narich most recently where the only change order was because we asked to have something additional done, and we were willing to pay an extra cost for that, which was minimal anyway. So in an ideal world, it's a zero change order, but we recognize there's some unknowns, especially when you're dealing with old infrastructure and you don't know where exactly everything is. They may encounter something there that isn't in the plans and is justifiable to have an extra. And so we are asking the board to execute or authorize the GM to execute the contract in the amount of the bid, but to allow us, or me specifically, to authorize change orders up to $24,800, or approximately 5% if needed, only if needed. Hopefully that won't be the case.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, or? Yeah, what's the pleasure of the board?
I'll move to approve the recommendation.
Wait, public comment?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, public comment, sorry. Must have been taking sleeping pills today. Any public comment? Somebody's got to have a comment out there.
No
Okay.
public here, like Ed said.
We'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move to approve the recommended action.
And I'll second it.
It's been regularly moved and seconded that we authorize staff to approve the contract with Nurich and Sons and include, on top of this, a 5% contingency to be used by staff up to $24,800 as needed if there are justifiable overruns. Is that right?
Correct.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Okay, item number 5. Approval to allocate funding for contract change order for the Cuesta Heights Water Storage and Distribution Improvements Project Phase 1.
All right, we have Jennifer here. Speaking to Jennifer, she's
All right.
and she's been
Change
handling.
orders. Yeah, so normally we do ask for a 5% contingency for change orders, but anything larger than that 5%, it goes back to the board for approval. So that's what this one is. So back in December of 2018, the board approved or awarded Mazingo Construction to construct Phase 1 of the Cuesta Heights Water Storage and Distribution Improvements Project. It's a mouthful. So I provided you guys a map kind of that shows Phase 1 and Phase 2. So the first thing I'm talking about is Phase 1. The board already approved or awarded Mazingo Construction that contract in the amount of $208,990. And we were in discussions since probably 2016 or so with the property developer of the proposed Cuesta Heights subdivision. And you can see where that kind of is shown on the map where Phase 1 is going through the subdivision, the proposed subdivision. We had an agreement with the developer at that time that the developer was going to come in, rough grade in the road, and then we were going to come in after that and bring in our water main. Since then, the developer has rescinded his plans, and so we've already awarded our project to Mazingo, but we have no road. So we ended up going back to Mazingo and saying, hey, how much can you do this for? And could you do this as part of your contract of Phase 1? And they said, sure can, and provided us a cost. The cost to build the road is $76,800, and it includes a 12-foot wide access driveway per county code, or county driveway standards. It has drainage ditches and also entails the installation of riprap at select locations for erosion control. And also they're going to be doing the tank pad grading, getting it all level, built up so that when we're ready to do our tank, it'll already be taken care of as well. We figured if they're already out there mobilized, have them take care of it anyway. So that's what this agenda item is for. Is there any questions about that?
Director Ringen would have a question.
Yeah, actually, I have a couple of them. I read through this, and it all, it makes complete sense. Everything looks good. The only thing that I'd like to know, I'm assuming the developer is not moving forward on developing the properties at this time.
I cannot answer on behalf of the developer.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
I guess where I was going with this is what, originally he was going to foot the bill for the road.
Correct.
Now he's not. Now TUD's stuck for it.
Correct.
And my question is what happens when he moves forward with his project? I would hope that there is some sort of monies coming back in to replace what we had to put out because of the original deal did not go through.
Yeah, so right now as it stands, there's no reimbursements back to the district. The developer did have a proposed driveway, or he was building a road, so his was road standards. And they were at certain cut fill elevations for his development. Well, now that we're doing this project, we aren't designing this big road, we're actually just doing this driveway. And it's not per his plan, and it's just strictly for us.
Okay, so is this road going to be, I know it's going to be permanent, but is it going to be paved? Is it going to be what he's going to need in order to do his project?
Just going to be a 12-foot wide lane that's gravel, and it's not going to be at the elevations that he was wanting.
Okay.
He proposed a 30-foot wide road paved to get up to the tank.
And what, if the project then moves forward, is he going to be able to regrade that road and maybe expose our, pipes to some sort of damage or anything?
Yeah, so he would either have to redesign his development to match our road, or he would need to relocate our facilities at a later date so that we do have proper cover.
Okay, thank you very much.
Barbara?
So we're talking about the TUD taking on the responsibility of grading and paving the road and, up to the tank.
Well, base rock paving.
Excuse me, you're right, you're correct, okay. And so with phase 2 and the connection to the Columbia system, how will this Cuesta Heights tank benefit the Columbia area?
Would you like to answer? I would like to. He may certainly answer. I will.
Getting me excited. All right, so we that's the Heights project. We talk about 12-foot wide roads, 30-foot wide roads, paved gravel, blah 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 blah. What this means to me, these names you'll recognize. Gopher Tank goes away. The 420 tank goes away. The Saratoga tank goes away, and the Saratoga hydro station goes away.
Don, that's our best facilities.
And racetrack booster station.
Those are
Cause Flat goes
those
away.
are our best facilities.
2015, when Dave Andrews was here, round 1, we had tank divers in cleaning and inspecting the 420 tank, and they bailed out of there as quickly as they could. Said this tank has to come down right now. What year is it? 2019. I'm excited this project is moving along. When you say things are painstakingly slow, I understand wholeheartedly what you mean. So anyway, I'm excited about this project. So I'm sorry. That's what it meant to me.
Yeah, to speak.
Hey, John's excited about this project, we know that.
To speak to the timeframes, we could have moved a lot faster on this if it wasn't for all those coordination with the developer. I mean, we really tried to accommodate his timeframes, and it wasn't until it wasn't going to happen. His tentative map's going to expire if it hasn't already. We needed to move forward. Plus, we've been trying to get a grant this whole time for this project. So sometimes, waiting for the grant, at some point, it doesn't make sense, especially when we've got this fully designed, we're ready to roll. Jennifer has designed the contract so that we could get reimbursed if the grant funding comes in later. It would be eligible for submission. But the district's needs, as Don outlined, are now. And we had this in our capital improvement plan and in our rate study as being funded with rates. So a grant was wonderful, and we're still pursuing that, but we can't wait any longer.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions from the public? Pleasure, board.
I move to approve the recommended action.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Unanimous.
Okay, item number 6. Award contract to Mazingo Construction Incorporated for the construction of the Cuesta Heights Water Storage and Distribution Improvements Project Phase 2.
Told you it's a mouthful. Okay, so this is the second phase of the water supply and distribution lines. The first phase being from the pump station to the tank lot, which we already awarded on December 11th. And then this phase goes from our current existing Columbia water system to the pump station, and then actually connects phase 1 and phase 2 together. So then after this is done, we just need the pump station and the tank, and we're good to go. The project was circulated for bids on October 16th. We received 3 bids from local contractors, and we opened them on December 13th. The low bid being Mazingo Construction, once again, at $530,890. And I'm glad to see that they got this bid, just because they're already doing the roadway, and they could use the material for the roadway, and so it'll be less cost for the district there, and they can do all the connection piping together as well. The Mazingo Construction was the lowest responsive bidder.
And then I'm next.
Okay.
So, once this work gets taken care of, phase 1, phase 2, are we hung up just on the Cuesta Heights tank being built?
Yep.
Before we can
That tank
hook up
is
and,
Probably
pump station.
95% design tank. And then the pump station has a little more work on it, but yep, once those are done.
what time frame are we hopefully looking at?
For the tank, we were thinking,
We're going to do the geotechnical investigation after the change order you just approved for tank grading the tank pad. We do the geotech investigation and then put it. I think Jennifer and I were talking about putting it out to bid this winter, fall for construction, probably next year.
paid for by a CDBG grant, hopefully.
Hopefully, the board also allowed us to submit a CDBG grant, so we're kind of waiting to see on that too. That you can't incur expenses before a certain date. So we will probably have to be faced with a decision on the tank. Do we wait and see what the outcome of the grant application is or not? Other thing is that we don't really want to build a tank in the winter. Coatings are bad, steel rusts, it's just not the best. So we probably bid it in the winter and wait and award and get construction started next year.
How difficult is it going to be to, I mean, I've visited all those nasty old tanks. I can see why Don's really excited about this. How difficult is it going to be to hook up to all those spider web systems up there? I mean, I'm kind of familiar with that area, and a lot of that's old, really old.
So pretty much a lot of the infrastructure that's currently there is going to remain. This phase 2 is connecting the new infrastructure to the old infrastructure. Once the tanks are taken out, those either pipe straight through or some sort of a PRV to reduce pressure. But other than that, all the remaining infrastructure in the system is going to stay.
So I guess what I was kind of concerned about, you hook up this nice, brand new, beautiful system with all this good water and pressure, and all of a sudden the pipes are hand grenading everywhere.
Yeah, so that's what the PRVs are there for. So we'll set a PRV at the gopher tank, and it'll mimic gopher pressure. So there shouldn't be any issues there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Jennifer, I really appreciate you building in the contract the potential to get future reimbursement. That's so good. It would be kind of an interesting exercise to look at the cost avoidance, the maintenance avoidance with this one tank. What the savings, let's say in a year, would be in just routine maintenance on those tanks, the Saratoga and the Gopher and all that we no longer have to do.
Several $1,000s a year.
Several thousand. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Plus long-term, some the replacement costs as well. So, what's the size of the tank at Cuesta Heights?
It's going to be a 500,000.
500,000.
400,000?
500,000.
500,000?
And Monte Grande is what, 6?
I'm sorry,
600,000?
I think it's 600,000. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
It's 6.
Okay. And then what's the one, just for perspective, the one over there by the Forest Service?
That's a
3 million.
3 million.
Oh, bigger. I would just,
Good perspective.
for the audience, yeah. All right. Well, I don't have any further questions.
I got one, Bob.
Okay, Jeff.
So how many tie-ins to the existing system are you going to have?
Science for phase 2?
Yeah,
So we need to we are going to reconnect 7 services on Shaw's Flat Road. Right now they have service off of, it's kind of hard to see, it's dark blue line.
Right.
There's 5 water meter boxes there that go down, all the way down about 1,500 feet for some of these people. So we're going to be relocating those meters to in front of their properties, so 7.
I was just was asking about the looping on it, so that you're going to have plenty of looping when it's all done, aren't you, or are you?
Yes, and actually, once everything's said and done and the tank is built, our Saratoga tank and hydro station will be no more, and the people that are on hydro that lose water when they lose power will have water at all times now.
So no generator.
Fantastic. It's good to get rid of those.
Okay, Barbara?
So will this be pulling water from the treatment plant over in Columbia then? So those disconnected, the 5 disconnected ones, were they previously served by the Sonora plant?
Yeah, I believe that would be Sonora's.
I think
They mix. I mean, we can serve them from Columbia or Sonora,
Ways.
Right
but
now?
because you can get Columbia water into Saratoga, but predominantly Sonora. So predominantly they were on Sonora, and they'll be on Columbia.
I see. So you can get Columbia water down Saratoga.
No, to some of the services on over in here, you can. And yeah, you can get Columbia water here. Sonora water can get into this tank and is pumped.
To the Saratoga tank.
But
Okay.
it won't. I don't think it will impact resiliency or redundancy. Really, I think it by having this tank, it's going to mitigate all the vulnerabilities we have with these storage tanks. We're going to have a good amount of storage sitting right here, and we will be able to take the Pedro Y tank down for service. Whereas I'm not sure we could do that right now for a long term. Yeah.
Good.
Great. Any other, Ron?
Yeah, this map doesn't show far enough that I think, but will this get rid of the pillbox? It will. That right there is awesome.
Are you talking Shaw's Flat? Yes.
Otherwise known as a billbox.
Yes.
Any other questions from the board? Public? Thank you, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve the recommended action.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the recommended action. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Unanimous.
Nice.
Very good, very good. Thank
Hey,
you.
Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, staff reports.
Doing some good.
Pardon?
I was just saying, those are fun to approve, those
Yeah.
ones that do a lot of good.
Although the only thing I'll say real briefly is the board will see a number of more of these contracts coming up. Just list a few of them. We've got a mastication project that's out to bid. We're targeting the next board meeting to bring that to you for award. We've got patch paving coming up that we do an annual patch paving contract. The Twain Hart Interceptor Sewer Assessment. That's going to be put out to bid here real shortly, and we'll be coming back to the board to award for that work. Jennifer, who just left, she's working on the Mona Vista tank and is ready to put that out to bid either later this week or the beginning of next week. That will be for construction this year. Lakewood Dam, this was a FEMA funded project. We had a small dam failure. We're waiting on the final permit, but hope to put that out to bid in June for construction late in the season. And then also on the list is the O'Neill Tunnel and the Columbia Spill 1, which we're still kind of working through some details on that. So we have quite a bit that will be coming to the board here in the near future.
Good. Awesome. Other staff reports?
Yes, if I may, on your days before you, a couple of issues. As you know, we've been talking about a lot of work being done on water supply and wastewater. We won't go into a lot of detail, but one of the requests your board has made is to conduct a joint meeting between the county and TUD so that we could help tell the story of TUD and our priorities. That's grown into a tour from upstream to downstream, and as is grown beyond just simply your TUD board and the county board to include our legislators, state water board, direct appointed officials, among others. So what you have before you is a draft itinerary tentatively scheduled for June 6, 2019, where we gather here at this site at 8:30, board a bus, and then we go up country to Pinecrest Lake, and then have staff basically narrate a story of important issues and concerns and priorities to Tuolumne Utilities District, and then we'll work our way downstream. All of this at this point is draft and tentative. I know our board secretary is reaching out to these other individuals and organizations to get their availability. So if you have any thoughts about what you'd like to see and possibly change, we welcome your input, as well as possibly other individuals you might think would benefit from this tour. From what I hear, it has been done in the past, but it's been a while. So it's probably time to do it again to take us in the right direction in launching what I'm informally calling the Water Supply Initiative as a companion to the county's Firewise initiative. And so that's before you. You can comment now or anytime over the weeks ahead. The sooner the better.
Ron? So I have to compliment you folks on putting this together. This is very aggressive compared to what's been done in the past. I think you picked a lot of really good sites, and I think that everyone will get a lot out of that, the way it's set up, and I'm really impressed with the list of people that you've come up with to invite. That shows real attempt to work with our fellow governmental agencies and people that are, involved, that should be involved and know what we're doing. So pat on the back for this.
Thank you. In addition, we have staff working on kind of a multi-page, I don't want to say marketing brochure, but what I call a leave behind. But basically, it's about TUD, what our priorities are, some of the projects that are priorities, issues, and concerns. And then the back page would have a picture of your board, contact information for more if they have further questions. And we hope to have that available as handouts during this tour so we can help spread the word.
Great. Great job.
So that's being worked on as we speak. And then the last thing I'll comment on, staff's been trying to ramp up the legislative presence of Tuolumne Utilities District. As you know, California and our federal government is always enacting new laws, many of which have costly financial impacts to Tuolumne Utilities District and its ratepayers. And so staff is, under some of your board comments, is trying to make more of a presence through Aqua Legislative Committee, also the CSDA Legislative Committee, and then part of your strategic planning is talking about our input on new and emerging bills and lobbying. And so I directed one of our staff members, Lisa Westbrook, to attend the Aqua Legislative Committee. It is probably the most well-attended committee of Aqua, which is the Association of California Water Agencies, an association we belong to that fights on behalf of water agencies throughout the state. And what you see before you is a brief summary of some of the bills and salient information that was presented at the Legislative Committee that was held in conflict with one of our workshops. I was hoping to attend. I think there was some elected officials on your board that wanted to attend. So because we had a conflict, Lisa Westbrook attended and will continue to attend in the future. And this is her summary takeaway from that legislative symposium held in Sacramento, March 6th. Of note is a bill that Director Ringen presented to us through Mountain Counties, which on the back page is SB 474, that deals with some water right petitions and things. And it's so new we don't have any real information on it. It hasn't been assigned to a committee yet, so the summary there is about all we have at this current point. And then a part of that packet and of interest at the legislative symposium was the Governor Newsom's water tax proposal. And under that proposal, Governor Newsom is looking to add a line item water tax on all water utility bills throughout California, help fund disadvantaged communities. Aqua's taken an opposition to that effort and has they support disadvantaged communities and safe and quality drinking water. They're just, Aqua's opposed to the tax and instead has a competing measure to help fund disadvantaged communities as it relates to safe and quality drinking water, and that's all in your packet here as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, so are you asking for input on possible participants?
Well, there's no input. It's just an education for your board, and if you're interested to have any follow-up, we'd love to hear it.
See a couple.
But we do have staff actively engaged in CSDA and Aqua Legislative Committee, so we're going to be tracking these bills carefully, and we'll be providing regular updates to your board.
I have a question on the that water tax. Do the disadvantaged communities have to also pay it?
That's a good question. In my sense is because they're disadvantaged, there may be an exception there, but the water tax would be on the line item of every utility bill. We're disadvantaged, so that there's a question there on whether or not certain areas in our community would be responsible for paying. But whatever revenues generated goes to Sacramento, and then that revenue would be managed by the State Water Resource Control Board, and disadvantaged communities would have to apply for grant funding, and those funds would be used to assist those disadvantaged communities with upgrading their systems to meet drinking water standards and or consolidation. Right now there's a lot of talk about consolidation. Some of that's happened here in Tuolumne County, but the reality is when you consolidate, there's a big cost associated with it, especially if there's a geographic distance involved. So I don't know how the state's going to bridge the gap in some of these, but this water tax is proposed to be a source of funding to be able to begin moving in the direction of assisting disadvantaged communities. And I don't think there's a lot of answers on whether or not disadvantaged communities would be responsible for paying this particular tax. In this case, the example provided here, I think the tax is for about $12 a year. So it'd be about $1 per month per ratepayer statewide.
In the beginning.
In the beginning, yes.
Yeah. Just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. It starts that way.
So I do have a name for you, and but I'm having an old man moment, and I can't remember it, but I'll get it to you. But the reason why I think this lady should be invited, I know I invited her to the T-Stan Irwimp meeting, and also a couple of field trips that the T-Stan Irwimp went on. She handles the purse strings of the grants at the Water Board, and she loves this area. And I think with some of these things that we're going to be looking at, having her know what's behind it and why maybe we're looking for some grants here and there to try and move, she would be very powerful to have on that bus.
Right. Super. Any other staff reports? None. Okay. Directors' communications and reports.
Sorry.
Oh,
Did you have something, Barb?
yeah.
Oh.
Well, no, as a
Excuse me.
director,
Okay.
we're,
You're going to give your director's report?
yeah, our
Okay.
communication report, right, okay. Let's see, so I've been meeting with Scott Ratterman, who's one of the directors on CCWD, and John Kingsbury to take a look at Mountain County's getting our 501c3, which is a nonprofit. We currently have a 501c6, which allows us to do what we do. But it's becoming apparent with lots of state funding out there, including RCD funding and NRCS funding, which is federal funding, that we could take a look at facilitating, bringing together funding sources and NGOs that are associate members to help write grants that will help purveyors. So looks like a good thing since a lot of our purveyors aren't staffed to write those kinds of grants. So we're working on that. The other thing we were looking at is maybe developing I don't know if it's a retainer or cost share agreement so that mountain counties can retain legal counsel to look at actions, whether they're PG&E actions, but in a general area for the whole mountain counties as a whole, like, not besides the legislative committee. And so we're researching that, what that would look like. So then the other thing is the SB Senate Bill 474. That's the sort of the attack on, one more time, county of origin water rights. I'll quote one of the folks that works for another of our entities, a longtime lobbyist, and he said, this legislation has significant negative implications for areas of origin and county of origin water districts in terms of state filings. So that's SB 474, and everybody's taking a very close look at that. So with that, that's all I have to share. All the same meetings we all attended, so that's okay.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, just same meetings we were all at, and that's all I have today.
Okay. I had 3-6, same meetings, strategic planning with all the rest of my fellow board directors, which I thought was very well done. We cover a lot of ground at those things, and I think it's really great we're doing it in-house, and thank you, Mr. GM, for doing that, and having Dave Anders there as a facilitator or contributor. I think that's really powerful. 3-8, attended and participated in the Mountain Counties Water Resources Association Governance Committee meeting. Discussion in the changes to the bylaws to be presented to the Mountain Counties Board of Directors for possible approval and adoption, and that's for adding some members to the board, including associate members. I think this is extremely positive and going to make mountain counties just even that much more effective than they already are. And then this morning, attended and participated in the Tuolumne County Natural Resources Committee meeting. That's it for me.
Great, thanks. I've been working with our general manager on meeting with some of our neighboring people, like agencies that share a lot of the same resources that we do, and discussing how we can possibly work together. And other than that, that's all I have to report. So we will, at this point, recess to closed session. Read it. I have to read it? Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation pursuant to paragraph 2 of subdivision D of section 54956.9, one case. Good job.